I like to share with you stories that I think connect in a lot of different facets of how stuff became what it is and how that will apply to you. Nick Launay, one of the best producers, mixers, engineers ever. The guy had a #1 record in the UK with the band Idols a couple of years back. With their album Super Mono, which is an amazing album. I recommend people check that out if you haven't heard it already. Also, he's worked with the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. He's worked with Talking Heads, David Byrne. He's worked with Nick Cave, Arcade Fire. The guy's done tons of stuff that's amazing. So let me just say this. He's got this great story when he was engineering for Hugh Padgham when Hugh was recording Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight. One of the best, most memorable drum recordings of all time. One of the greatest songs, but also probably the most memorable drum fill and drum sound, of a certain decade. No question. So check out this story because there's so much to this that can apply to you. I guarantee it. Doesn't matter what genre you're doing or you're in. Check this out. Fair use for teaching purposes. Fair use for teaching purposes.
So anyway, that's the thing. But it was just, and then credit to the A&R guy at Virgin because Phil signed to Virgin, which was a bit of a, it was an unusual record company because it was independent for such a big artist, singer of Genesis, who were a massive band. But the A&R guy, he chose that as the first single. I mean, Phil didn't even think it was a single because it has nothing about it that's single-like. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sure enough, it came out and went to #1 in England, and probably one of the most famous songs of all time.
I'm sure it went to #1 in the States too. It must have.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, it was everywhere.
Although for the American version, there's classic A&R stuff. We had to overdub drums from the beginning. There is a single version that came out in America, and it has a backbeat.
Oh, I don't remember that at all. I only remember the drum machine version. Wow.
Well, they were clearly wrong in saying that it was necessary, but they said, man, we got to have a backbeat. We can't play it on American radio. Won't play it unless it's got a backbeat. Oh, you mean the snare drum on 2 and 4? Okay, so he played this tom part.
Wow.
And it's out there. It's definitely out. It was the American single, and of course it then shot up the charts. And I think they then kind of switched it over to the album version.
Right.
And we never hear the other version now. And it was edited down. I actually did the edit on it. I had to chop that song down because it had to be. Oh, this is funny actually. It had to be. Basically, for a single, it had to be like 3 minutes something, 3 minutes 40, 3 minutes 50. So edited it because it's actually close to 5 minutes long, that song, I think. I edited it with that A&R guy. And what's his name? I'm terrible with names. I guess it's 40 years ago. So I edited this thing with the A&R guy. Who came down, and then it was sent to Phil and Hugh for approval. But we couldn't get it down enough without losing precious bits. So this is another one that you could look out for on the single. It's listed as 370.
Nice.
It's 4 minutes,
10. That's great.
4 minutes 10. Yeah. So it had that, and it had this backbeat on it. So there's a version out there of singles of that song with a
that's
different
fantastic. Because then the DJs would look at it, they'd see a 3, and like, okay, fine.
And they go, yeah, I'll play it. I thought that was genius.
God, that is.
We got an A&R guy who knew how great that song was and pushed it as the single, and the artist did not. You should keep this in mind and translate it to your world, even if you don't have an A&R guy. Do you have a guy who is, somebody who mixed the song for you, a producer, somebody? a mastering engineer, somebody who says, hey man, I love this song. This is the song. This is your hit right here. Do you have somebody who's a listening person, who's a good listener, who knows what stuff could be, and then says that? Because it's possible they have the ear for what could be the song, and you are ignoring a song that should be pushed, should be released, should be let go. Because that's something I noticed also, and I want to talk about that was mentioned in here. There's nothing. Did you notice how he said Phil Collins had to do an American version that had a backbeat, snare on 2 and 4 from the beginning instead of the way that song goes, which is the drums come in 3 minutes into the song or something? You realize that that is another version that exists. Did it hurt having that version? It didn't hurt in the least, because the UK version with the way it was supposed to be, which everyone wound up, that's the version we all hear today. That was the one that got successful, and it didn't matter that there's another version out there that's not as good sitting there. You should not be worried about your own image, yourself, the perception you think other people will have of you by trying to hold back things until they're perfect and then let them go. There's nothing wrong with having multiple versions of a song out there. If one of them's going to hit, it's going to hit, and it's got nothing to do with whether there's another version out there or 3 versions out there of the same song that's going to make something worse for you than it would have been if you just put out all the things that you create. In other words, if you spend time on one version, then you want to redo the song later, then fine, put out both versions. There's no benefit to holding it and waiting for the right one. The only possible thing you could be thinking is, this isn't going to be good enough, and I don't like the way that yada yada. You let too much time go by, then you worry that this isn't that great, and you want to do it again, and you want to do it again, and you're worried about the way you will be perceived. You're worried that because people hear this other version, now they won't like you as an artist. It doesn't hurt to have these other versions. It didn't hurt In the Air Tonight. What makes you think it's going to hurt you? It's not. But what will hurt you is keeping the stuff in your head that you need to then clear out in order to focus on other things. If you occupy your brain with making something great, making it better, and never being satisfied, that plays on you. It plagues you. It basically means you did all this work and it didn't go anywhere. And that's like a negative impact on your psyche that exists until you clear it out, until you take the risk, until you shed the fear of the way people will perceive you, the way the song, if it gets no likes, you don't think it's not who you want to be as an artist. This whole image control thing is something that singer-songwriters especially, because people in bands, they could do the same thing, but a lot of times the other people in that band keep them honest. Whereas when they're alone writing a song and it's their baby, if that thing didn't achieve mentally what you expected it to achieve in the final mix, you could, and especially if you're just doing one song at a time, you could really hold on to that, suffocate it, never let it go out, record it 100 times. A lot of people do that. Whereas when you're in a band and other people besides you are pushing for things to go out, that's a huge benefit to actually getting it out. Also working on more songs at once, because that way you don't ever get the ability to focus something into the ground and just beat it to death, is a huge benefit also, because you have multiple songs you're focused on at one time. That way, everything has a little less importance. You're a little less concerned with the perfection of something, or the way, or everything I just described about the image and the way you'll be perceived and whether the song will be liked, and not wanting to ruin what could be. This is the point. If you live your life in this concept of you're too scared to put things out, or to put out multiple versions or whatever, because you never want to release things because you're always worried about that perception thing. You're always worried you're going to blow your one chance. You're always worried that it's better to hold it than to give it. You're not letting the art fly. You're not fearless. You're not somebody who probably deserves the success that you could get, because the people that do are fearless. Those people, they don't care about all that extra, thought process that goes into holding things back. They just let it go. And if they need to do it again later, they do it again. If they need to record it 3-4 more times, they do it again. That's just how it is. A lot of great songs were recorded multiple times. They were released multiple times. And sometimes it takes that in order to get to where it's great. But if you never let a song out, you keep it here forever, you then work on it 100 times, what aren't you doing that you could be doing? What else could you be focused on? Instead, you got your history. It's like the cache files on the computer. You got your history all here filled up, jammed up, slowing you down. It's slowing down your processing speed. It's also this huge negative thought that you weren't able to achieve something you wanted and how upset you are about that. Whether it's like you think you're not thinking about it, but you are. Get rid of the stuff. Every time in your head you think, oh, I wish I could finish that song. I got to spend time doing this. You wouldn't have to think about it if you actually finished it, if you actually put it out. Then you'd only be thinking about, I want to redo this. I want to redo that. Sure, you could have those redo thoughts, but don't have the thoughts of never letting things go. I'm an advocate for people to actually let their creative work fly, because what you don't hear, this is the point, ready? If you put out nothing as an artist, but a few songs here and there, then that's all you are as an artist. You're a few song artist. You're here and there. You might as well be somebody who does it as a hobby on the weekends, and not all the time, only on vacations. It's not your true focus. It's not your true career. It's not your true everything, because if it was, you would not be so scared to put out who you are. At some point in time when you created whatever, you put it out. Because by doing that, you're stamping in the ground who you are. You're allowing yourself to grow. You're allowing yourself to improve, whether it's in mixes or in songwriting. You put out everything, because then you can improve, you can get better, and you can clear your head and be able to focus on the future work that you will create. Just like in this case, that A&R guy knew what was good and the artist didn't. Phil wouldn't have released it as a single, but thank goodness he had that virgin art, the A&R guy, to say, hey, you know what? This is the single. They pushed it, and now one of the most memorable songs ever. Also, ingenuity comes into play in music like crazy. When things don't work, when it's not the norm, when it's not typical, like a song that's 5 minutes being a single, you got to bust out the ingenuity. And what do we got? Nick Launay talking about 3 minutes and 70 seconds because he knew a DJ would see the 3 and just play it. All right? That's the point. You expand the lines to include what it is that you are doing. You don't look at the lines and the guides as we got to stay between this. This isn't the right business for you if that's how you look at things. You need to be thinking outside the box. That's how they even got to that stuff to start with, those crazy cool sounds. They're miking up amps, they're distorting things. I mean, in general, people are doing things like this to get as crazy as they can. They're taking drum machines, sending it through an amplifier, making it dirty and gross. They're trying to go places people haven't been. So, that's how you get drum sounds that are that cool, which actually started on the Peter Gabriel Intruder record when Phil played drums on that. And then he wanted that for his In the Air Tonight, which only works, mind you, if you don't play cymbals. So everybody's got to be on the same page. In other words, you could have the best idea as an engineer or a producer ever, but if the drummer has to play cymbals and insists on playing cymbals, then you can't do it. You can't do it. Certain things work for certain things, and it all has to jive and work together. And this is one of those things where your artist, if you're the artist, you could have created the best song ever. And if a producer came along and gave you some, something to that made it feel like all of a sudden there was some surprise factor in it that wasn't there before, that's the good stuff. When you listen to In the Air Tonight and all of a sudden the drums come in after there's no drums and this very kind of chill drum beat, it's it's a drum machine. Drum beat, very chill, and then just vocals and this keyboard line, and then all of a sudden you hear do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Once you hear that, you know what happens? It's like a train just hit the listener. And in the same case that Nick Launay says, the first time he heard that, the first time Hugh Padgham heard that, they fell off their chairs practically, all right? Because the point is, right away when something's great. And if it jars you, that means that you could be right in the sweet spot where half the audience hates it, half the audience loves it, and that could be the great stuff because it's jarring. It's like a bus running over you. Now, that is the good stuff. If you've got a song where all of a sudden there's some surprise in it, it's a little outside the norm, and then there's something that takes a huge turn, something like that, that's the great stuff, in my opinion. And that's why I love Nick Launay, is he's all about this sort of like vibe and the craziness and the chaos. That's a big part of the way he tries to make his productions and his recordings. So I love this kind of thing. And in my opinion, if you have anybody in your life that's helping you with stuff, that's giving you a vibe like that in any way, you should stick with them, because as the artist, even if it jars you, that could be something amazing. that you cannot squelch, you cannot squander, you cannot just, basically beat that to the ground by doing it 100 times because it's not exactly what you pictured in your head. Like I said, release more than one version. At least that way you'll be keeping it moving, which is a huge part of my philosophy of how to become better. You keep it moving, and then maybe you give yourself the chance of success. Just like Joe Pesci wouldn't have been successful as an actor if he just didn't do enough work to be noticed by Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese. If he didn't do enough, they would never have seen something he did and say, hey, this guy'd be perfect in Raging Bull. And then he wouldn't have had the career he had. He had to do enough work for that. So if you're just releasing one song every blue moon, once here, once there, months go by, are you really giving yourself the chance that you should be giving yourself by putting out as much as you could possibly put out? Because if you were doing that, you'd be putting out everything, every version, everything. It wouldn't have to be perfect. And that, in my opinion, is how you can look back on your days and say to yourself, hey, I did what I had to do. I did enough. I did so much. Nobody could possibly have done more than me. That's the only way you could get to that mentally, which will give you peace. That will give you peace. Anything short of that, you're going to have regrets. So you don't want the regrets. You should be thinking about your artwork in this way. That's my opinion. Do me a favor. I want to hear your opinion. If you feel this same thing inside you, throw it in the comments. And if you feel that there's stuff you could release or anything like this that you've experienced that's been a positive, throw it in the comments, all right? Because I want to hear about it. Let's talk about it. I think it'll help a lot of people. Subscribe if you haven't already. My name's Evan Jaffe. This is Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.